Ambassador Kethvar had overseen 43 successful planetary acquisitions for the hegemony of rational minds. Each followed the same elegant pattern: arrival, assessment, formal presentation of integration terms, grateful acceptance by the primitive locals, followed by orderly resource extraction and population management. Simple, efficient, mathematically perfect. Earth was supposed to be acquisition number 44. The blue-green planet had all the standard markers: single sapient species, pre-spaceflight technology, fragmented political structures, environmental degradation indicating imminent self-destruction without intervention, textbook material for what the hegemony diplomatically termed voluntary developmental assistance. Kethvar's survey team had spent 3 rotations cataloging Earth's resources and studying the dominant species through their primitive communication networks. The creatures called themselves humans, displayed typical pre-contact tribal behaviors, and seemed obsessed with something called content creation. All perfectly normal for a civilization requiring guidance. The formal first contact protocols had been refined over 8 centuries. Land in an obviously advanced vessel, present credentials from the Hegemony Council, explain the benefits of joining the greater galactic community, accept their inevitable surrender with dignified magnanimity, move to resource allocation. What Kethvar had not anticipated was the response from the first human delegation. "Oh my God," the lead human representative said, consulting what appeared to be a primitive data slate. "You guys are doing the whole Independence Day thing, aren't you? That's adorable." Kethvar exchanged glances with his tactical advisor, a crystalline Vorthak named Chen. Neither had encountered this particular resistance pattern in their extensive xenological training. "I am afraid I do not understand your reference," Kethvar replied, maintaining proper diplomatic protocols. "We represent the hegemony of rational minds, a coalition of 12 advanced species dedicated to bringing order and prosperity to developing civilizations. We offer your species membership in our collective." The human who had introduced herself as Dr. Martinez from something called NASA actually snorted. Behind her, several other humans were making quiet sounds that their physiology indicated were expressions of amusement. "Right, okay," Dr. Martinez said, wiping at her eyes. "So, you're the Galactic Federation, basically. Got it. And let me guess, if we don't join voluntarily, you'll be forced to take more direct action for the greater good of the galaxy." "That is an accurate assessment of our standard integration procedures," Chen admitted, confusion evident in the harmonic vibrations of their crystalline form. This triggered what could only be described as an explosion of human laughter. Not the nervous, fear-based laughter Kethvar had observed in other species facing conquest. Genuine, delighted amusement. One human actually fell out of their chair. "Oh, this is precious," another human said, consulting their own device. "They're hitting every single trope. The formal language, the coalition of advanced species, the veiled threats wrapped in diplomatic courtesy. It's like they used a checklist." "Did someone check if they have a giant doom laser pointed at Earth?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Because that would complete the whole thing." Kethvar felt something he had never experienced in 4 decades of diplomacy: professional embarrassment. "Our orbital platform does possess defensive capabilities." "There it is," the humans erupted again. Shentel's crystalline structure began cycling through colors that indicated deep confusion. "Ambassador, I believe these humans may be suffering from some form of neurological dysfunction. Their response patterns are completely outside our behavioral models." "We can hear you," Dr. Martinez said cheerfully. "And trust me, we're not crazy. We're just not impressed." See, the thing about your refined protocols is that we've been imagining this exact scenario for about 100 years. Books, movies, TV shows, video games. We've explored every possible variation of alien first contact. And I've got to say, you guys are being pretty derivative. The word derivative hit Kethvar like a plasma bolt. In his entire career, no species had ever accused the hegemony of lacking originality. Perhaps, he said carefully, you could explain what you would consider non-derivative? Dr. Martinez brightened. Well, for starters, the whole "we come in peace but join us or else" thing is really played out. If you're going to threaten a planet, commit to it. Be scary, make it memorable. This polite, bureaucratic approach just screams middle management. Middle management. Chantel's harmonics reached frequencies that indicated genuine distress. Look, another human said, we appreciate the effort, we really do, but maybe workshop your material a bit before the next invasion. The delivery needs work, the threat level is unclear, and honestly, your ship design is kind of generic. Kethvar stared at the humans, who were now apparently critiquing the hegemony's entire first contact methodology like it was some form of entertainment. In 43 successful acquisitions, nothing had prepared him for a species that responded to potential conquest with constructive feedback. We will take your suggestions under advisement, he managed. Great. Dr. Martinez beamed. We'll be here when you're ready for take 2. 3 weeks after what hegemony records would euphemistically classify as initial contact complications, senior xenosociologist Kethmiran descended to Earth's surface with a singular mission: decode the human anomaly before it infected other potential acquisitions with similar behavioral disorders. Kethmiran had studied 17 different species' pre-contact psychological profiles. The patterns were universal: fear, awe, desperate negotiation, eventual submission. Humans had somehow skipped directly to film criticism. The fundamental issue, Kethmiran explained to their research assistant, a young hegemony intern named Velos, is that these creatures appear to have experienced first contact scenarios countless times before we arrived. Their neural pathways show no surprise response whatsoever. They had established a temporary research facility in what humans called Los Angeles, primarily because the local population seemed unsurprised by the presence of alien technology. Several humans had asked if they were shooting something and requested to be extras. Dr. Chen, Kethmiri addressed their first interview subject, can you explain why your species responded to our arrival with amusement? Dr. Chen, a human behavioral psychologist, settled into her chair with what appeared to be a caffeinated beverage. You want the short version or the dissertation? The comprehensive analysis, please. Okay, well, your people aren't the first aliens we've met, fictionally speaking. Dr. Chen pulled up a holographic display that made Velos emit surprised harmonics. We've been imagining this conversation since before we had powered flight. Star Trek, Babylon 5, Mass Effect, Independence Day, District 9, Contact. We've explored every conceivable variant of how this could go. Kethmiran made careful notes. You anticipated our specific approach. Your exact approach. The formal language, the benevolent integration offer, the implied consequences for refusal. It's called the alien hegemony trope in our narrative studies. We have academic papers analyzing its psychological appeal to authoritarian civilization. Velos whispered urgently in Kethmiran's auditory appendage. Did she just psychoanalyze our entire governmental structure? Furthermore, Dr. Chen continued, we've spent decades debating optimal human responses to various alien contact scenarios. Your approach triggered our condescending space empire protocols, which are, fuck them until they go away or get interesting. The next interview proved even more illuminating. Professor Williams, a human expert in something called speculative fiction, had prepared visual aids. "See, the problem with your methodology," Professor Williams explained, projecting images of various spacecraft, "is that you're approximately 70 years behind our imagination curve. Your ship design hits every single generic alien vessel checkbox, the chrome finish, the geometric shapes, the complete lack of visible weapon systems, because you're peaceful explorers." Kethmeran examined the projected images with growing discomfort. The resemblance to hegemony vessel design was, "These are your fictional spacecraft? From 1953, yeah. We moved past that aesthetic decades ago. Now our imaginary aliens show up in ships that look like crystalline flowers, or living creatures, or structures that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Your guys went with flying conference room. What would constitute an impressive arrival in human terms?" Professor Williams grinned. "Something we haven't imagined yet. That's the challenge with a species that has weaponized creativity. We've already run every scenario through our collective unconscious and found the optimal responses." The breakthrough came during Kethmeran's interview with a human child, age approximately 8 standard years. "So, you're studying why grown-ups laughed at the space people?" the child asked. "That is correct. It's because they were boring." Kethmeran paused. "Boring? My dad showed me the video. They talked like the principal at school when she's pretending not to be mad. All fancy words but not really saying anything scary. If I was a space alien, I'd be way cooler." "How would you be cooler?" The child's eyes lit up. "I'd show up during the biggest sports game when everyone's watching and challenge their best player to single combat for the planet. Or I'd hack every screen on Earth to show them what happened to the last planet that said no. Or I'd just teleport their leaders to my ship and serve them dinner while explaining exactly how many different ways I could destroy them, but make it polite." Kethmeran stared at the young human, who had just outlined 3 invasion strategies that would have bypassed every known psychological defense mechanism. "This would be more effective than our current approach. Duh. You have to give people a story they want to be part of. Nobody wants to be in a boring space story." Later that evening, Kethmeran compiled their preliminary report. Species 347b, humans, appear to have evolved beyond traditional conquest methodologies through extensive fictional exploration of potential scenarios. Recommend immediate strategic consultation before proceeding with integration protocol. The Emergency Council of the Hegemony of Rational Minds had convened only 12 times in 8 centuries, usually to address galactic-scale threats like rogue artificial intelligences or reality-warping anomalies. Never before had they gathered to discuss a single pre-space flight planet's marketing critique. "Let me understand this correctly," Chancellor Vrexton said, their bioluminescent patches flickering with barely contained frustration. "A species that has not achieved faster-than-light travel has rejected our integration offer on aesthetic grounds." "The situation is more complex than rejection," Kethmeran reported from the center of the crystalline amphitheater. "They have offered to help us improve our approach." The silence that followed could have powered a small star. "Improve our approach," repeated Councillor SciFi, whose species had perfected the art of diplomatic conquest before humans discovered agriculture. "To planetary acquisition." They provided a detailed analysis of our methodology's shortcomings and suggested alternative frameworks for more engaging galactic domination. Kethmeron activated the holographic display containing humanity's recommendations. They have also volunteered to serve as creative consultants, free of charge, to demonstrate what they term proper Galactic Empire aesthetics. Chancellor Vrexton's patches shifted to deep purple, indicating either rage or severe indigestion. We are the hegemony of rational minds. We do not require assistance from primitive. With respect, Chancellor, Kethmeron continued, their suggestions demonstrate remarkable strategic insight. They identified 17 critical flaws in our standard protocols that we had never considered. 3 days later, a human delegation arrived aboard the Hegemony flagship, not through prisoner transport or diplomatic shuttle, but in what appeared to be a retrofitted cargo vessel, covered in colorful symbols and playing what humans call death metal, at volumes that rattled the ship's superstructure. "Much better entrance," announced the lead consultant, a human who introduced herself simply as Phoenix. "You want to establish dominance right from the arrival. The music helps with psychological conditioning." Phoenix's team consisted of individuals with peculiar specializations: a narrative designer, a user experience expert, and someone whose title was literally Director of Awesome. They had converted the Hegemony's primary conference chamber into what they called a war room within hours. "Okay, so here's your basic problem," the Director of Awesome explained, gesturing at holographic displays showing traditional Hegemony conquest patterns. "You're thinking like accountants, not conquerors. Where's the drama? Where's the spectacle? You're asking civilizations to surrender to middle management. Our methods are proven efficient," protested Strategic Coordinator Malthak. "Efficient at what? Boring people into submission?" Phoenix pulled up comparative data. "Look at your integration timelines. Average of 4 years from first contact to full compliance, with significant resistance movements persisting for decades. That's not success, that's bureaucratic attrition." The narrative designer, a human called Rivera, took over the presentation. "The issue is narrative engagement. You're not giving target civilizations a story they want to participate in. Nobody dreams of being conquered by a filing cabinet." "What do you suggest?" Chancellor Vrexton asked, against their better judgment. "Give us your next 3 scheduled acquisitions," Phoenix said. "Let us redesign your approach. Full creative control, complete strategic overhaul. If we don't improve your success metrics by at least 300%, we'll submit to integration ourselves." "And if you do improve our metrics?" Phoenix grinned, displaying the predatory dental arrangement that had made humans successful hunters. "Then we negotiate a long-term consulting contract." The first test case was the Delphinian Cooperative, a peaceful aquatic civilization known for their philosophical depth and collective decision-making processes. The Hegemony's traditional approach would have involved months of careful diplomatic overtures, emphasizing mutual benefit and gradual integration. The human approach involved Phoenix personally challenging the Delphinian Council to a philosophical debate broadcast across their entire planet, with the loser submitting to the winner's worldview. The debate lasted 6 hours, covered topics from quantum consciousness to the optimal ratio of art to science in civilized society, and ended with the Delphinians requesting immediate full membership in the Hegemony because they had never encountered such stimulating intellectual discourse. Integration time, 14 hours. "How did you know they would respond to intellectual challenge?" Kethmeron asked. "Because you told us they were philosophers," Rivera replied. "You approached them like they were merchants. Different species, different motivations, different optimal engagement strategies. It's not complicated." The second test involved the Korthak Empire, a militaristic civilization that had been resisting hegemony overtures for 2 decades through guerrilla warfare and strategic retreats. The director of Awesome convinced the hegemony to challenge the Korthak to single combat between champions, with the winner claiming the loser's territory. The combat lasted 3 minutes. The Korthak champion, after being thoroughly defeated by a hegemony biomechanical warrior enhanced with human tactical algorithms, immediately requested to join the organization that could produce such magnificent fighters. Integration time, 4 days. "You made Conquest fun," Chancellor Vrexton observed. Their bioluminescent patches now cycling through colors indicating profound confusion, mixed with grudging admiration. "We made it appropriate," Phoenix corrected. "Every species has optimal psychological triggers. You just have to find the right story for the right audience." 6 months after the human consulting arrangement began, the hegemony of rational minds had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history: a waiting list for conquest. The tertiary collective of hive worlds had submitted formal applications requesting invasion. The independent mining guilds were competing to see who could surrender most creatively. 3 separate civilizations had redesigned their planetary defense systems, specifically to provide more entertaining resistance. "Our efficiency metrics have increased by 847%, reported Chief Administrator Golvan during the quarterly review. "Average integration time has dropped from 4 years to 11 days. Resistance movements have become performance art." Chancellor Vrexton examined the data streams with something approaching disbelief. Where once the hegemony had struggled to maintain control over fractious member worlds, their territories now ran themselves with minimal oversight. Conquered civilizations were actually recruiting their neighbors. "How did the humans accomplish this?" the Chancellor asked. Phoenix, now bearing the official title of Director of Galactic Narrative Engagement, lounged in a chair that definitely hadn't been regulation approved. "Simple. We gave everyone better villains to fight." The explanation had taken weeks to fully comprehend. Humans had restructured the entire hegemony operation around what they called engagement optimization. Instead of crushing resistance, they had channeled it into productive directions. Rebellious worlds were given increasingly challenging administrative tasks disguised as acts of defiance. Revolutionary leaders found themselves accidentally running efficient bureaucracies while believing they were undermining the system. The Vectharian resistance spent 6 months organizing elaborate sabotage missions, Rubera noted, consulting her ever-present datapad. They successfully infiltrated and disrupted 17 logistical operations that we needed reorganized anyway. They're now managing supply chains across 4 sectors and think they're fighting the power. But the true scope of human infiltration only became apparent when Chancellor Vrexton requested a complete administrative review. "Director Phoenix," they said, "we require a comprehensive analysis of human personnel integration across hegemony operations." Phoenix exchanged glances with her team members, an expression the Chancellor had learned to interpret as significant amusement. "You might want to sit down for this." The holographic display showed the hegemony's organizational structure, with human positions highlighted in blue. Blue dots appeared throughout every level of the hierarchy, not just in consulting roles, but embedded in strategic planning, resource allocation, diplomatic corps, even the military command structure. "When did we authorize this level of human integration?" Chancellor Vrexton demanded. "You didn't," Phoenix replied cheerfully. "You authorized consulting. We consulted that your organization needed better management at every level, so we fixed it." The director of Awesome pulled up personnel records. "Captain Torres is now running your 4th Fleet tactical operations. Dr. Nakamura redesigned your agricultural distribution networks. General Chang commands your peacekeeping forces in the Outer Rim. Professor Kim handles xenological research. They're all doing exactly what you originally hired us to help with, making your empire actually functional. This is... Chancellor Vrexthon struggled to find appropriate terminology. This is infiltration, subversion, conquest by bureaucratic insertion. This is management consulting, Rivera corrected. We identified systematic inefficiencies and implemented human resources solutions, standard practice. The realization struck the Chancellor with the force of a collapsing star. You have conquered the hegemony. We've optimized the hegemony, Phoenix said. There's a difference. Your empire is bigger, more efficient, and significantly more fun to run than it was before. Everybody wins. But we are no longer in control of our own organization. Phoenix shrugged. Were you ever? You had a dysfunctional bureaucracy held together by fear and tradition. Now you have a streamlined operation that people actually want to participate in. The results speak for themselves. Chancellor Vrexthon accessed the most recent reports. Territorial expansion was ahead of schedule. Member world satisfaction had reached historic highs. Economic efficiency had increased across all sectors. Even the hegemony's traditional enemies were requesting diplomatic negotiations instead of planning military resistance. The question, Phoenix continued, is whether you're going to keep fighting a successful reorganization or embrace your new role as the galaxy's most effective empire. And there it was. The final irony that would have made the hegemony's original conquest assessment teams laugh until their respiratory systems failed. Humanity had achieved galactic dominance not through superior technology or military force, but by being the only species that understood the fundamental truth about power. It wasn't about being feared. It was about being indispensable. The species that had once mocked alien conquest protocols as derivative entertainment had simply written themselves into the story as the protagonists.